Hi, welcome to this week's podcast with Yosef Johnson from UAC. Joined again with my friend and author Robert Heiduk from Germany, and author of the KAATSU book and co-author of the Methodologies book with Dr. Kreinhoff. Thanks for joining me again, Robert. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me again, Yosef.
This has been really like eye-opening for me too, because I didn't up until I mentioned this before, but I had not been familiar with KAATSU until 6-7 years ago. I think I was introduced to it by Hank, and then when he introduced me to you, it was really fascinating. When I got the book, by the way, the book available in the store right now. I was really surprised to see all the interesting things in there. All the different, I should say, applications in there. And so I just did a podcast yesterday on something that KAATSU is enormously effective with, which was conditioning. We were talking about, in the United States especially, we kind of do things a little bit backwards. We don't train all year round. So in Europe, I know, like in Germany, you guys look at it more from a year-round point of view than we do, at least, and the Russians definitely did. Here we kind of look at it like a preseason, get in shape in 2 weeks, and hopefully everything works out. Well, obviously that doesn't hold water scientifically. But with the KAATSU, what you were telling me that I found absolutely fascinating is the way that KAATSU can affect metabolic conditioning, so that we can enhance the effects of metabolic conditioning and with less work. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So I'm going to preface it real quickly. I know that we don't want to blunt the recovery process with certain things too much, because then the adaptation won't take place. So we want adaptation. So the key, or the holy grail, would be causing adaptation without blunting the recovery process. You know what I mean? Like blunting that whole thing. And apparently that's possible. So if you would take it away, let me know how this metabolic conditioning with KAATSU works.
Yes. The whole thing, let's say, imagine the basic physiological foundation. So what KAATSU really does is, at a given external mechanical load, it is able to produce much more higher metabolic load, like you only would see in much higher external intensities. So as we know is, or what we know is, the downside of higher intensities or external intensities is it increases the recovery time. And what we can do now is we can simulate a higher metabolic demand, but at very low external loads. Let's say you have a soccer player, and in soccer, one thing we need, one demand, or one physical demand, or one physical quality is repeated sprint ability. Yeah. Okay. So let's say normally you would need a strength and conditioning coach wants to train repeated sprint ability. And to get the certain amount of stimulus or fatigue, you will normally need, let's say, 10 repetitions of a sprint exercise. And with KAATSU, you could reach the same amount of fatigue within lower repetitions of the sprint intervals. Let's say with 5 intervals, then you get the same amount of fatigue, which you can measure with lactate testing. And this would mean that you can get the same amount of fatigue with much less than load, and this means faster recovery. And especially in-season training in game sports, this is a very high. This has very high value, because, as we talked before, we both don't think that you can develop much physical qualities during in season. What the strength and conditioning coach has made to make sure is that they are ready for the next game, because as a head coach I want to know that my best players are ready. And unfortunately this is a downward spiral. The better a player is, the more often the head coach wants to have him on the field. And then the result is, like we know, overuse injuries, because they want the same player, the same player, and then sometimes he has an Achilles tendon rupture just from going a step backward. And you say, hey, where does it come from? Okay, from overuse injury during the multiple repeated mechanical loads without any recovery. And that's the point.
So this is like when you're talking and describing this, I'm thinking adaptogenic in my head. Like, because a lot of people, I'm going to take a real quick detour. Adaptogenics, a lot of people, and I did in the beginning, thought that this was like a defense system against stress, when in fact it actually is an irritant to the system. And so when it irritates the system, the body adapts. That's why it's an adaptogenic, and that's why the body is more resilient to stress. So basically what you're saying is this is kind of like an adaptogenic, but an external, not an oral one, or a nutritional one, but a mechanical adaptogenic. Am I right?
Yes, it is. I would say a metabolic adaptogenic. And the one molecule I want to point out in our conversation today is the formerly misleading role or thoughts about lactate. In the 90s, we had the opinions that lactate is a metabolic waste product which we have to flush out immediately to enhance recovery. Since today, we know that lactate has a totally different meaning. And lactate, we know that today lactate can act as a alternate fuel for the body. The body can use it for the aerobic energy system to use it. The brain can use lactate for it as an alternate fuel to glucose. And so many scientists today say lactate is a trigger for all kinds of metabolic reactions. And they see it, some of them call it lacthormone, like hormone. Because it seems to have more function or trigger functions that you can compare it better to some kinds of hormones. And so as a consequence for us practitioners is that do not flush out lactate. Try to hold it in the body as long as possible. If you get the pain, the burning in the muscles, try to hold the body in the metabolic environment during the complete training sessions and not do recover more. I can remember some thoughts of Henk Reinhoff. He came to the same conclusion. He brought this example with 400-meter runners. In the rest period, they did isometric squats. That should help them to hold the lactate in the muscle, because his conclusion was brilliant. He said, why should I flush out lactate? I want to have the body adapt to this metabolic environment in order to handle it better for the 400-meter runner. So it would be completely counterproductive to flush out lactate. And this is brilliant thoughts from Henk, and you can enhance it with the belts, the KAATSU belts, because once you put the belts on, you can measure it via. I have tons of data that alone putting on the bands is like exercise for the body, because you can measure an increase in autonomic excitation. You can measure an increase in DC potential, which is a marker that the brain homeostasis is not on the same on the level on the initial level. And you can measure a slightly increase in lactate, even if you're passive.
Yeah.
The resting lactate is rising. And once you start your exercise like sprints, and then you make a rest, the belts make it more difficult to push out the lactate out of the working muscles. And this leads, normally this would lead, a rest would lead to recovery, but if you put on the KAATSU belts, you see an increase in lactate even in the rest period. And so if you start the next interval, it's like you never have finished the previous interval. So this is very easy to see that the fatigue curve is much higher than if you do it without the bands. So this is very easy, very basic physiology, that you would reach muscle failure or fatigue in a shorter period of time.
So I want to make sure that I follow this correctly, because I know that other people are going to want to know exactly how would that work. So let me make sure that the listener understands this. The lactate is not the direct cause onto the damage. It is not that's not what's causing the damage, but it is causing the adaptation.
Right.
So basically, what you've done is kind of like the other's a shotgun approach. You have to take the damage to get the adaptation. Now, what you're saying is we can get the adaptation without the damage.
Yes, but very important, metabolic adaptation.
Yeah.
Sometimes we wish to get some damage because we want mechanical adaptation. But this is not the problem in elite sports. In elite sports, we have the problem that we have reached the borders of trainability of the musculoskeletal systems, and the injury number of injuries speaks a clear language.
Absolutely.
So this is one system we have already reached the borders. And so the strength and the conditioning coach has to think, hey, but this is only one system of the body. But how can I condition different functional systems of the body without getting another additional load on the musculoskeletal system? Because we know that especially the connective tissue adapts at a much lower rate than, for example, the muscle fiber or maybe the bones or whatever. But for the practitioners, we all know that we have reached the border since the East Germans discovered in the 80s. We cannot increase volume anymore because we have the problem that we don't see trainability as an ability of sports performance. And trainability is how much load can, for example, my weak link, and this is the connective tissue, for example, can take. So all my conditioning program has to focus or left the weak link and address different systems of the body. And here's when KAATSU comes into play, and I can reach much higher metabolic demands at very low mechanical rates.
This is interesting because that was the rate limiting factor, and this is not, I don't want to go off on a different subject, but that was the rate limiting factor for a lot of performance enhancing substances, was the connective tissue couldn't keep up. And so the injury rate started. I know that the Russians, they had kind of come to a conclusion, and I think the GDR did too, probably, is at the same time. It's like, you can't just give them everything, whatever you want, and expect them to keep getting better. They started getting hurt because of the weak link was the connective tissue. So basically with this, is like a way around that limitation.
What separates an elite, world-class athlete from everyone else? Their genes make them quicker, react faster, and more explosive. What if there was a way to, in a sense, turn on those elite athlete genes in the average person? Recent advances in genomic research and sports nutrition have proven this is now possible. Introducing Milesink by Nootromic Sport Nutrition. Multiple studies show it increases quickness, explosiveness, and strength. In most cases, your vertical increases by at least 1 inch an hour after it's taken. Through a proprietary blend of ingredients, Milesink in effect flips the switch on those genes that make you jump higher, run faster, and lift heavier weights. Here are several Milesink testimonials.
This is Daniel Stokes. He's a sprinter. What was your best time before we started training this season with Milesink?
21.5.
And what's your best time as of today?
20.7.
Could you explain to us what the fast twitch muscle supplements done for you, Milesink?
It made me more explosive. It helped with my reaction time off the ground, bring my knees up quicker, and I continually progress.
This is Matt Tomey, head strength and conditioning coach for football and men's basketball at Michigan Tech. If you haven't tried Nootromic Sport Nutrition's supplement Milesink yet, you're definitely missing out. I've had athletes here try the supplement and really enjoy the benefits, including an immediate improvement in vertical jump of about 1 inch. Milesink really stands out with its ability to improve power output, speed, reaction time, even potentially quick decision making. If you haven't checked out this unique supplement yet, go ahead and pick up a bottle of Milesink and give it a shot and just see for yourself.
Here is lead formulator Rick Brewer's brief explanation of Milesink.
Milesink evolved out of the neuroproteomic research we conducted starting back in 2005 to nutritionally boost the speed strength traits of well-trained athletes. These speed strength traits could include things like reaction time, starting power, maximal speed, quickness and agility, and also fine motor skills. Double-blind placebo studies as well as many outcome studies have been conducted on well-trained athletes from many sports and of many ages. The results of this research have shown a sizable boost in muscle contractions as well as the synchronization of these muscle contractions during speed strength activities.
Which is a game changer. And you and I spoke about this off camera. The game changer is used way too much in American culture. I can tell you that for sure. And I'm sure maybe it's in German culture too, but here for sure. But this really is kind of like it turns everything on its ear, because if you can get a great return on investment of time at little to no risk or collateral damage, you've conquered all of the problems that the average coach faces. You've kind of circumvented or conquered all of them at one time, because now you don't have to worry about non-contact injuries. You don't have to worry about them being recovered for the next match. You've got all of the things that you wanted and none of the things that you didn't want, really. I mean, it almost, everything in life, if for a good result, there needed to be some payment involved or risk involved or whatever. And in this, it almost kind of like bypasses all of it. Am I right?
Right. And I think you said you spoke about the game changer thing, and I would to take it in the truest sense of the word, what game changer means for the practitioner. If you have such a powerful new tool, the average strength and conditioning coach wants to have clear rules, step-by-step instructions. Of course, we are not on the level, so we are not talking about this. But the coaches on a higher level must also think that this powerful tool is a game changer, and this doesn't mean that it is just another tool on their toolbox, because they're feeling safe with their traditional tools because they have the experience, of course. And there are not many coaches they want to focus or learn from the scratch again, because they are masters in their field, of course, yeah. And they don't like to leave fields where they are already experts. You know what I mean? This is for them a problem. Huh? But if you want to utilize all the benefits of this powerful tool, you have to reorganize your toolbox and rethink your whole training system when this game changer comes in. What does this mean for your other tools during the season or in season, for example? Huh? I don't say that this is overall replacement for all and everything. This is bullshit. Huh? But you can think when there is an indication to use it, and in a certain period of time, it can surely replace other things, or not only replace, because it's the better choice.
Absolutely. I mean, it would, there's a lot of different phases. Even like what I alluded to earlier in the United States, where they have a preseason, and they only have a couple weeks. This isn't going to change everything, but it's certainly going to reduce the injury problem. It would also speed up the process of conditioning, and it would also reduce. I think it'd have a psychological benefit too for the athlete, because he's not going into these workouts that are just really, really difficult and hard to recover from. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, then you would also see he wouldn't need as much rest necessarily, or as his sleep would not be compromised from because like with overtraining, sleep could be a little bit interrupted as well. All those different things could also kind of be put to the side with the use of this, correct?
Yes, of course. Then, because I have also many practical experience in that field, and athletes are really astonished by when I say, now the workout is over. Really? Yes, because I feel like I had the workout for 1 hour, but we did it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then if you put off the bands, they are able to recover very, very fast, that they can say, now 10 minutes later, I could do it again. And they understand it. If you put on the bands as any other methodologies, the educational part is not talk too much to athlete and explain it verbally, just to let them feel and ask questions, because the higher the level of the athlete, the more experienced he is or she, and she will he or she will know or feel the benefits very quickly. And I would say, from my experiences, athletes are more open-minded than many coaches, because an athlete will take anything which makes him or her better. And what I experience is that many coaches are stuck in their methodologies. They are not say, I make you better. They say, I am the kettlebell coach, and kettlebells are good for anything. I am the weightlifting coach.
Right.
And my job is to make them stronger in the gym. Period. You know what I mean? Yeah?
Absolutely.
So they are fixed on methodologies, why they should better fixed on results, and understanding the demands of the sports, and take more time to learn how the athlete's personality is, and so. But they are workers like on the Ford band, always the same methodologies, because I don't want to get out of my comfort zone. I have no time. Yes, that is very good in the fitness industry. The people can be very good entertained with such things. Or my job is to make them die in a training session. And everyone believes, if I die, that's good for me. Because biologically, this is completely nonsense.
Right.
So this is more a sign of, it shows that the lack of education in biology and adaptation. So this is the main problem.
When you're talking, I don't know, you were almost reading my mind when you were talking about this, because when I got started in the field, I got started as the athlete, and I was just searching out the best ways to train. I didn't meet any other coaches until much later, maybe 10 years later. And I realized there was a big difference. The only thing I cared about was how could I get better. I didn't care what the method was. I didn't care where it came from. I didn't care, if they told me to stand on my head in the corner and it would make me better, I would do it. I didn't care. And I had no preconception about anything or objection. And what I found was a lot of coaches, that's not their focus. Their focus, and you correct me if I'm wrong, as it works in Germany, but the ego is what they're really most protective of. That they're the expert.
Definitely,
and they don't like to look. They don't like to look like they're not the expert, or it wasn't their idea.
Yeah, I think it is maybe a side effect of the commercial side of being a coach, which you have, of course, a longer than traditional than the former East Bloc, because this was a different system. But I discovered the real. Not real coach is not a good terminology, but the best coaches in the world, which work as head coaches in different sports, they are a little like managers, I would say, and not one of 20 members of their staff, which all have very limited expertise, for example. They discover, at the end, the same laws, like you said, I read your mind. I don't have to read your mind, because if you record everything you see and make your conclusions, you will discover the same laws, of course. I met the best coaches in the world in different sports, and they discover all the same laws. Maybe they have different terminologies for what they find, but you see, hey, this is the same law I found. I made the same mistakes, okay, but at the end, the best coaches find the laws by expertise, by doing many little errors, and this is very good to make every day little errors. But it's stupid to make the same error again and again. And I think this is the side effect of this disease expertise is I claim myself as an expert because I get money of this, and the more people the more follower I have, I get more feedback, and I feel more being an expert. But my only expertise is that I catch the attention of the people and claim myself I'm an expert. So this is we all know what an expert is. An expert is a person who has a long experience in one field.
Yeah.
And this is not valid for most people that call themselves expert on the internets.
Oh, exactly. I say this, to other people, that in most fields, you have no idea who the expert is.
Right.
It's very rare. So if you talk about an expert in a certain field, a real world-class expert, the average person will have no idea who that is. They have to be told who it is. And typically, if you see a so-called expert who's in the media or gets talked to, you see them a lot, I would be very leery of their expertise. Because because I think that their main objective is being well known, not being an expert. When you're a real expert, you're very single-minded and focused, and you don't care about all the other stuff. They don't really care what anybody thinks either. They are focused in on what they're doing, and they're typically not very good socially, so they don't interview very well. They're not very gregarious. They're normally introverts, and they're normally, I would say almost awkward socially. They don't, and I know a lot of like in our field, as I publish a lot of the most brilliant people in the world, and yeah, I wouldn't put them on national television because it would, it wouldn't make sense because they wouldn't get the message across. So I think that's an important point for people to understand, is that expertise on that really high level is you have to really go search them out. You would have to really look to find them, and at different times, I've coached for a good number of years now. Now that I'm older, and I'll have one person in my local area. A lot of people maybe not know what I do, and one will think I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and then one other person thinks that I'm really, really good at what I'm doing, and neither one of them really has any reason to know why. Even if they like what I'm doing, they don't know why. They're really, neither one is qualified to judge, to be honest, because they don't know enough about the field to judge expertise on either side. And I've noticed that, like you and I were talking earlier about the COVID crisis, is that you don't really have enough knowledge to be able to discern sometimes with who the experts really are, because it's not a field that we've researched very much or been involved in. So for the most part, the average person is left to go off. Someone said they're the experts, so I guess that's who it is. So we're gonna, follow that instruction. And in this case, that can kind of be dangerous. In our field, it's kind of it'll be a waste of time, because you'll follow somebody who is an internet expert, published a couple books, in the United States, and next thing you know, they work in the United States. The way it works is if you work with a professional athlete, you're an expert.
Right.
And in fact, that's where the lowest level of expertise exists, in my opinion, because you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Just don't hurt him. If you're training one of these high level athletes, all you have to do is not hurt him, and you're an expert, because he's genetically gifted. So, so that's what how I feel about that, and I know you do too. Now, back to the metabolic conditioning component and the practical part. How would this work? So, like, let's say we've got let's say a soccer team, and at different points in the year, how would that work? Would you actually have them with the bands on, let's say on the legs, and they're running, different distances or speeds or whatever? I don't really know. So you got to fill in the whole picture. I have no idea how that would actually work. What does it look like if a coach came to you and said, Robert, we want to start using the KAATSU in our conditioning? How do we do it?
Okay. First of all, like in every designing training session or training program, is what's the goal? Yeah. For example, if the goal would be enhancing recovery, yeah, you could do I wouldn't say it's a crazy thing, because it's the justification is biologically based. You could do a strength training program for recovery, which means you do a typical strength training with KAATSU bands on. You can do push-ups, all kinds of very light body weights exercises, and it would need half an hour or 20 minutes. And you can go to failure, really to go to failure, and this would enhance recovery, because you get the metabolic environment, and as a counter reaction, you get the hormonal response, which we all know is one positive benefit for recovery. So the growth hormones and all or testosterone, or mainly growth hormone. Yeah. But what you don't get is the muscle damage you would have with a traditional strength training program, because you wouldn't normally would say, hey, I don't do a strength training for recovery, because you do all the muscle damage, and this would lead to a prolonged recovery. But with these minimal external loads on KAATSU strength training, you don't get the negative effects, but you get all the positive effects. As we stated in our last meeting, it means there is nothing to repair because there is no damage, but there are all the repairing processes which means that you have a shift from the negative effects, which we know from the negative curve of the supercompensation, for example, and you have a slightly negative instead of a very big negative, but a very strong positive curve. And that is, by the way, another explanation why you get hypertrophic effects in a shorter period of time than with a traditional methodology, because you have not such muscle damage. And that solves our problem in elite sports, because again, we are on the border of mechanical ability to tolerate load. So we don't have to talk, but we need a mechanical stress, yes, but not additional stress for elite athletes on the track or on the pitch or whatever. And this is why how KAATSU methodology could fit in, because on the one hand, you can enhance recovery on an active way. You can have passive methodologies, but this is an active methodology. It doesn't take much time, a few minutes, so it can be integrated very easily. And you can maintain or develop certain physical qualities maybe during in season, and this was otherwise impossible. That would be one example. And I tell you a different example in a sport that is very well known in the US, powerlifting. I also used with one young powerlifter, and in Germany we have a national league powerlifting, which means that they compete in a team of 4 lifters during a season, and at the end of the season, the most successful team wins the league, the powerlifting league. And usually, the younger lifters will be into the duty at the beginning of the season, because they want to save the better lifters for the finals. Okay. What I did, I trained a very young powerlifter who was very talented, and I decided to do 3 traditional days of the power lifts, and 3 sessions of KAATSU in between during the season. And the aim of this strategy was with KAATSU is to enhance recovery and maybe to get an additional hypertrophy, which wouldn't be possible in season because you have to recover from the main exercises you need for powerlifting. And the reaction was very, very positive. He developed his lifting ability, and he got better during the season, so that he lifted during the whole season because he got better and better and better. Hey, we need you for the finals. And at the end of the season, he peaked at the finals, was the only lifter who lifted in all the events, and no injury. Wow. And this is if you do a competition once a month during a half a year, and do not have an injury, and peaked at the end of the season with personal best, I think this is a prime example that this methodology may had a positive influence, because he trained only 3 times. What does this mean? 3 times with his competition lifts, and 3 sessions between with KAATSU lifts like easy bench pressing, triceps extensions, all those additional exercises you would need. And the workouts were very short, 20 minutes. He felt very good, and I think the results speak or spoke for itself.
Wow, yeah, that's an amazing application. I mean, like I said, game changer might not be strong enough of a word, because it literally changes the whole thing. How would you, if you're using them to run, and you're looking at it from that point of view, as far as like you were talking about with Hank was using isometric holds to kind of duplicate the same idea, because the isometric one obviously will reduce the lactate flow outward or back to the heart or whatever. How would that look if, let's say, you have a soccer team, basketball team, and you're having them run? What are the instructions or the guidelines? Like, is there a speed limit where you'd want them not to run too fast? You know what I mean?
Right.
And what are the indications there?
Yes, the indications I call is technical failure or a drop in movement pattern quality, or a drop in speed. For example, you have some intervals, and you cannot predict how many intervals they are able to achieve this day, which is a normal thing, because the readiness of the organism is different every day. And so you run until they do not reach a certain amount of speed anymore, because otherwise it wouldn't be effective. If I train for speed endurance, and the speed drops under a critical level, it is not more effective to increase the speed endurance. And you see it by that the movement quality mechanics, they drop completely, and then this is I call technical failure. And you see it by, if you can prove it, you can measure it. Okay, now your time is dropping under a certain amount of level, then we're finished. And this is by the way a self-adaptive training load, because in another day an athlete could sprint 7 intervals, and another day he could only sprint 4 intervals until it comes to technical failure. So it is a self-adaptive system, and it makes sure that you only do as much as necessary and not as much as possible. What you can do additionally is, after you have reached the failure, you can put off the bands and do some additional sprints, and then you see, interestingly, that they can sprint at maximum level, for example. Interestingly, I never saw a drop in maximum speed, or, for example, another example, a drop in jumping ability. We did, for example, with basketballers testings. They did squats with the KAATSU bands on, 4 sets until failure. And normally you would expect, if you make a jump test before those squats and a jump test after those squats, you would think that the jumping ability is lower because of fatigue. But sure, this was not the case. The jumping ability was on the same level, and in some cases on a higher level than before. Wow. And my explanation of this is because of the excitement of the nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is so excited that they are able to jump as high as before, or some were able to jump higher. And this is because you can create in the training a stress you would normally only can create in a game. Yeah. But in a short period of time, and then you can recover very, very quickly. And I think this is maybe one takeaway for the coaches watching this podcast. And this is valid for every sport which has metabolic demands. You can create a race stress or competition stress situation in a very short period of time, and then recover very, very fast. And this is, I think, the biggest benefit of using KAATSU in the training.
Wow, yeah, that's enormous. Would you also, so with the intervals, basically you're using the same principles that we would normally use, where if we're using intervals, sprints, we'll say, okay, when the Hank's rule is always that if the speed drops by 10% or more, then we're done.
Right.
And I'm assuming you're kind of thinking along those same lines.
Totally. And I think this was also confirmed by in articles of Isurin. And so, if I remember right, if the speed drops by 10%, it is not effective anymore for speed development. And
right.
So, and this is a good rule of thumb for finishing. Then this. Yeah.
Okay. One other question to wrap that up. If you're running a longer distance, let's say you're running like a mile, and you're only running one repetition, so you're not going to have that repeat. How do you determine? Would you run the mile just as fast as you can, and just would that be and then you'll be done for the day? Like if you were running a longer distance, is that how that would work? If you're only using one run?
Okay. There are different approaches or different possibilities. Yeah. You can do it in short intervals. You have not. Don't have to run the whole mile.
Okay.
And this is usually I know from open water swimmers. Open water swimmers who use KAATSU also use it with interval training. Interestingly, I never thought it would be for such a long distance endurance sports the case, but they seem to benefit from it. So what I would like to suggest is that they maybe run the 50%, half a mile with the bands, then put them off and then run the rest, for example.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Or for example, like I do it with rowers, which everybody knows the aerobic system is the main energy source. The anaerobic also, but it is without any doubt the aerobic system. So what you can do, or you can do it also with triathletes. You can do it at the beginning of a long distance run or extensive rowing or cycling or running, whatever. You can do it at the beginning of the session. Short bursts of intervals in order to increase the amount of lactate, and then you remove the bands, and then you do your long distance sessions. And the aim of this methodology is that the body should learn to use or utilize lactate for the aerobic energy power system better. I want to teach the aerobic system to use lactate more efficiently as an alternate fuel.
So theoretically, then, if you do that over time, then the aerobic system is developed much more fully, as it's able to use lactate as a fuel.
Yes.
Wow. So that would change, once again, another change in the whole scheme of how we would do things. Now, one other quick one before we wrap up. When you take the bands off, and then let's say if you took the bands off and you ran more intervals, or you took the bands off and you ran the second half of the mile, once the bands come off, is there a change in your ability to recover? Is it decreased now that the bands are off, or does it stay the same?
I found that the recovery is more enhanced because it is very easy explainable by basic physiology, because blood flow is enhanced, and one thing we have one thing we need is enhanced blood flow. Yeah, more capillaries that are normally not used are now flooded with blood, and this is good for recovery. And again, the amount of metabolic reaction or stress or lactate is also triggering the negative response, which means the release of growth hormones, for example. And we know growth hormones are helping us to recover faster in connection with the increased blood flow. And I would say the athletes have these endorphin rush and have a positive feeling. Say, yeah, now really feel better. And we know that recovery is not a single physiological factor. It's a psycho-emotional factor. So if the athlete feels better and say, yeah, I'm now really better, then it's good for the psychophysiological system, because you have those hormones who give you the positive feeling. And everybody knows that a positive mindset helps for recovery and for boosting your all-over performance.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, it really, it gives you all of what you want, none of what you don't want in each case, whether it be in the intervals or the aerobic or whatever the case may be, in all those circumstances. Well, Robert, this has been fascinating for me, learning more about this whole process. And like I said, I think this is certainly a game changer. We got to do this again, and we're gonna have to do it. I think we're gonna have to get together a number of times, because we got a lot to talk about here, and
it'll be fun.
We're just beginning. So anyway, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out with me today, and I'm looking forward to us getting together here pretty soon and furthering this discussion.
Okay, Yosef, thank you for having me again.
Thank you.